Thank you everybody for joining and welcome to Grow Your Mind by GROUNOW. Today's session is all about leading without authority, stories of empowerment and earning the title. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Please engage with us, as many questions as you like, Q&A option, and one of the panelists will bring up your question and try to answer it. If for some reason we can't get to it, we will get back to you via email. And as always, be mindful, respectful of each other, and professional. It goes for everybody, hosts and panelists and everybody attending. I'm your host, Zaha, writer and advisor for GROUNOW. I'd like to kick it off by introducing our very special guest, Vidya Mahabaleshwar. Vidya, thanks for joining. Vidya is the Senior Director of Product Management at Frontline Education. She leads multiple product lines and teams. She has over 20 years of experience in the industry and frontline education. I'm told recently won the Tech and Learning Awards of Excellence for Best of 2022. So thank you, Vidya, for joining.
Thank you, Zaha. It's my pleasure being here.
And of course, as always, we have Suraj, the GROUNOW's founder and our career coach. Thanks, Suraj, for joining.
Thank you, Zaha.
Now, both of these guys are going to share some very, very cool stories about their experience with leadership opportunities when they didn't have the title and how they dealt with it. So the topic today, leading without authority. So it's about finding yourself in a situation where you don't have the title, you don't have the authority, but you find yourself having to step up or needing to step up because either your boss won't manage or he doesn't want to manage, or a different situation. And we'll talk about some of the different situations that you could be where this might happen. Now, how do you deal with it? What are the pros and cons of being this? What you need to be wary of when you're in a situation like this in your career? And I almost guarantee everybody reaches this point in their career at one point in time. So I was talking to Vidya earlier about this, and she brought up a very important, it's about distinguishing between authority and influence when you're in such a situation. So Vidya, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Sure, Zara. I think one of the key things that when I thought about this topic and what I want to share with the listeners, the thing that came to my mind is the terminology, right? Authority simply is where you actually have a certain role or you have a certain title based on your organization. And that gives you some power to make decisions or to actually assign responsibilities and tasks, right? So that's authority. And I think with the way that today's workforce is changing and there's trends where we have a lot of hybrid workers, right? You're not in the same room as other people. It's really important. It's increasingly important, I think, in today's world to have influence, even if you don't have that title or the role as per your organization chart. So influence from, if you just look up Google, there's a definition of influence, right? Influence is your capacity to affect someone's character or behavior. And I strongly believe that regardless you have a title or not, that you can influence others, right? And that's really a key for people who are, whether you're starting out early in your career or at any point. Even in my role, I have a senior director title, but I'm not the CEO of the company, right? So I still have to learn different ways to influence, whether it's my peers or it's my team, or if it's management, right? I report up to the C-level exec. So I think that's what I wanted to call out, Zaha, is it's very important to distinguish between authority and influence. You could influence with authority or you could influence others without having that title.
And what I got from one of your stories is that you really took the initiative, and that is how you built your influence. You started taking initiative. So what's the biggest challenge when you're leading without authority? So I think whatever comes to mind from your experience or what you think it might be if you do face this. Let's see some votes come in.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear, yes.
Hi, thank you. Hi, Vidya. This is Aparna. So I have a question from what experience you shared with me with us just now. So as you said, you took the initiative to reach out to the stakeholders. So is it with consent of your manager or without the consent? Like if your manager comes to know that you have reached the stakeholders without his permission or without letting him know, I don't think he would be happy about it. Like, how did you manage that scenario?
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Aparna. I think that's a really great question. A couple of things come to my mind, right? And you're right. Sometimes work cultures have very open communication across different levels of management. So first thing I would say is you have to be aware of what your work culture is. In some organizations, it's really flat and, anyone is encouraged to go talk to anyone, but that may not be the case, right? So when I worked in higher ed, for example, it was very bureaucratic. Like, you mentioned, right? If I went and just approached somebody without my manager knowing, they may not have liked it or, even approved of that. So it's important to sense and get to know your work culture. So depending on that, you can tailor, approach, right? So if you know that your work culture is quite, there's some level of that, command and control, then you can ask your manager before, saying, put forward your idea, like get a sketch of your idea, and you want to get a narrative on why you want to approach certain stakeholders and the benefit that your team or even your manager could derive from that conversation. So that's one way of approaching. So if it's a organization where, open communication is encouraged and, it's a flat organization, then you are more than welcome to just set up those conversations with the different stakeholders, right? But even in that case, I would make sure that I inform, right? So you want to see when you want to kind of ask for permission or, ask for advice versus you can inform your leader. So I do that even in my current job. I do work with some of the cross-functional stakeholders. I'm in product management, but I sometimes talk to sales directly. But I do want to make sure I don't want to blindside my manager, right? I keep him informed that, hey, I'm having these very important conversations with sales. Do you have any concerns or questions? So I know, where he's coming at and that he's not blindsided if, they go around and talk about my interactions with them. Hopefully that gives you some additional
Yes,
color.
yes. Yeah, that surely did. Thank you so much, Vidya.
Of course.
Thanks for that, Aparna.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah, I want to share my follow-up to the brilliant assessment that you made. It's authority versus influence, and I think it's a rite of passage because even if you have authority, unless you utilize influence, you're not going to be able to repeatedly get results. Just because you have a title and a name and a position, you cannot use that constantly. You have a debit card in that aspect. And I think even if you are the CEO of the company, you still need to influence someone else, the customer, board of directors, and even your own team. So I think from an aspect where before you're a leader, you're developing that important skill to make people do it because they realize it's the right thing to do, not because the boss or the manager said so. So I think for that reason, it's the right way to move and develop those skills, which are not necessarily taught either in school or corporate.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's almost like you have to, if you're trying to build influence, especially I think if you're working with a manager or a leader who doesn't want to lead, doesn't want to do his job, and you have to get something done or you want to lead them in the right way, you almost have to use kind of like, what's that movie where they get into your mind? And Inception. It's almost like Inception, where you have to make it seem like it is their idea just as well. And sometimes you have to really play around with psychology to navigate these murky waters. So I know, Suraj, you have had a very interesting story about a time when you were in a situation where you were leading without authority. So please share your story. It's a really fun story, guys. You have to hear it.
I think you're being very generous, but I'm going to accept that and thank you for letting me share the story. There was a moment in time before I became an official manager where I was leading an entire organization to bring in sales people from all over the globe and actually come in and have them trained so they can get the product out. And in that moment, especially, I did not have a title authority in order to do so, but had to mobilize people, had to mobilize expectations. Like someone said, no one likes surprises. And this is a lengthy process with a runway of anywhere between 6 to 12 months. And in that point, there are a lot of people who are going to be naturally upset because they have a lot of responsibilities to deliver too. And there was a moment in time where I was actually pulled aside because there was an imposition that there was a misconception that I was being too tough on the organization, trying to get things done. And I was being a little too rough around the edges, especially with certain people. Now, there's one thing that we all love to do, which is defend. And I think as soon as we defend, we make it about ourselves and not about the other person. Versus it takes a moment to really regroup and really make it about the other person, and more importantly, about all of us. At least for the folks that were local in the city where we, at least in the building that we were, and there were people dialed in. So everyone held the rope. And at that point, it was giving a speech about how lucky I, and not just me, but everyone were to be in this position, to be in a tech company, to be in the Bay Area, or be in any multinational city that is part of creating technology. And so everyone's holding the rope. So at this point, it was telling them, if you are ahead in your schedule, hold on to the rope, because it was a group project. And if you're behind, you're still going to hold on to it. So either we win together or we lose together. So when you're leading without authority, it's about making other people feel strong and that we're all in it together was what moved us forward. So along with the tears that happened in that call, we actually executed to a very high degree of people coming in from across the globe for a week. They got trained, and we actually had successful results after that in terms of product adoption. People were able to access information much quicker, example designs, and all of that rolled out much better. But none of that was with a position and title, but it was about making it about the people and giving them pride in what they were doing. And if someone was ahead, make sure that you take care of the person behind. Thank you for letting me share that.
I love that. I recently read a book in which they talk about this very same concept, where the term uses management with servitude, where your approach to managing and leading people is focused on them rather than it is on you. And if you have that mindset where you are focused on other people, your team, what they need, and you come across as generous enough and as a leader, that's what they will follow. That's when they will feel secure enough. They will find their wings to bloom and to fly when they realize that you have their back. So I think it's really important for a leader and in any kind of management role or any kind of leadership role to have that you focus rather than me focus. Yeah, absolutely. So I have a question for you, Vidya. Can you share a experience that you have had with a manager or in an early role that you've had where there was leadership without authority, or a situation like that in your career?
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like a lesson that I learned, and I apply it to even my current teams when I coach them. A lot of times, if you're a high achieving individual contributor, you're on a path to a promotion to a manager role, right? So that's typically most of the cases where you see somebody who's performing really well, and they're automatically, then they become managers. And sort of similar thing happened with me is, I was really high achieving, and the organization recognized me and said, okay, we want you to lead a team. We're going to give you a few analysts to manage, and really it was more of financial infrastructure and analysis team. And I just inherited a team. And I was very new, right? I said, okay, I'm really good at my job, so let me just figure this out. And now I'm a manager, so let me just assign, these tasks, right? So that was just a very interesting, phase in my career. And I had one individual on the team that was very senior to me and very, very experienced, however, just lacked motivation, right? And this person was very used to previously this whole team was managed by my manager. I think it's really important to show that genuine interest in your team members, whether you're a manager or not. And that's why, I was in that position, I was a manager, but it's something that stuck with me throughout, right? Even if you don't have the title, I think when you want certain things done by certain people that you're relying on them, showing that genuine interest is really key in understanding where they're at and what is causing them to be where they are, right? Are there barriers to them producing certain results? Maybe it's a skill set, maybe it's just their personality, maybe it's ways that they thrive on certain ways of working styles, right? Whether they want to be given instructions or having a really conversation to understand what would it take for them to be more proactive, right? Because in that situation where I was putting myself in is that I couldn't rely on this person to be proactive. I always needed to do this extra work because I thought that's the way to get them to produce the results, right, that we wanted. So that's a really big lesson learned for me. I think understanding, really trying to step up your listening skills. That is something that I'm continuously working on, is to be a better active listener. I think really giving a chance to the other person to explain themselves better, I think is really key. And that I wanted to share that example from my career. It still sticks out as one of the things that I would have done differently, is to try to understand them more, and maybe, different approaches would have, resulted in different outcome.
I really like that. Now, I wanted to talk about a topic which is related to this, where you have influence, you're working towards, you're doing the leadership role, but you don't have the title. There are some pros and cons. Pros are, yes, you get noticed by management, you get the title, you work towards it. But the con is sometimes you get taken advantage. So, Suraj, do you have something to say about this, where you might get taken advantage of? What are the things that we should look out for?
Yeah. So very quick thing. Aparna has her hand raised again. So we'll attend to her after I answer this, if that's okay.
Oh, sure. Let me bring it.
There's a particular reason why I was not happy with ending the title as Leading Without Authority, for precisely what you said, because you can easily be taken advantage of. I like to believe that most of the time it's done unknowingly. There are very few cases where it's knowingly done. Because we're all running at 100 miles per hour. So it's very hard for us to observe what we're doing. Now, in the case where you're leading without authority, the more you do that, people, especially management, realizes that they can get something out of us without having to compensate us for that. And it's not always about monetary compensation. So it's very important, is what I tell everyone, not give yourself away for free. So you got to do the right thing without hesitation. But at the same time, while you give respect, you got to also command respect. I would like to pause and either hear your question or see where you want to drive the conversation.
Sure. Do you want to bring up Aparna?
Sure.
Yeah, hi. So I have a question. I understand the lack of interest or the lack of motivation, but this is a scenario where they don't want to work for you, right? Because they don't want to work under you. So that's the ego problem there. So how would you deal with that?
I can take a stab.
Okay, sure.
Okay. All right. So I personally haven't experienced that exact scenario, Aparna, but I do have observed it right in my workplace as well. So there's a certain individual that's a very great collaborator, really almost pretty much across the organization can get people to adopt new ideas. And so she got promoted to a manager, and there were certain people that she worked with that weren't very happy. And I have, this isn't my current role actually, and I've heard so much about it, right? Why this person is, promoted, and I can see the conflict. This is where the conflict comes in, because we still have to work with those that are individuals, and we know they're not happy about certain individual that got promoted to manager and also has the title and also is more visible to the C-level exec. So one of the things is that I encourage or provide coaching on is try to bring them along for the journey, right? You again have to be, I feel like you should take that extra step, knowing that, yes, you're in that position that you deserve that recognition and the title, and you got it. At the same time, having empathy is really key, because if you just flip the coin, and if you were in the other side, you probably would have reacted the same way, right? Wait a second, we all are working really well. Why didn't I get promoted? Why did this person, right? You have a challenging scenario where actually you're probably, I think the way you described it is these people also report to you, so there's resistance. I think this goes back to one of the earlier questions we have, is there probably is that resistance that you have to handle. And one of the ways is you don't have to overly, say anything to them, but at the same time having that empathy that, there are other individuals that probably also desired this title. You could reach out to them in other ways, right? And make them part of some of your initiatives and provide them some greater empowerment to say that, hey, I can, benefit, like I can actually take you further along with me, right? You've got to create either some projects or, some initiatives where they also become visible to the people that you're visible to, because some of those things come with the title, right? You get more visibility and that somebody else craves. And the other thing is, what comes to my mind is there's a really great book. I don't know if you all have read. This is Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. This is a great book. It's just such a bestseller. And I keep going back to some of the gems in the book. And one of them was, observe like strengths of other people and really appreciate them. I think we sometimes tend to appreciate people less. A lot of times when there's something that goes wrong, there's so many people to criticize and you get a lot of feedback. But really, sometimes appreciation is, people are stingy with their appreciation. I think it's really key to highlight some of those team members, and they may really start to like you as their manager because they may have not received that from the others. Because I have noticed that, I still do notice that, people who tend to be in leadership roles tend to give less of the appreciation, more of the, constructive feedback. And I feel like you got to double up on the appreciation. And this is kind of what that book talks about, Dale Carnegie talks about really well, is to really, and then be sincere, right? Don't just give credit for, great job. Like, just don't be so vague as like, great job with these things, but really find something that your teammates or, the people that you think may not have or may have resistance, you find something that you can provide them with sincere appreciation. And the other thing, like I go back to, right, really find out what their interests are and how you can also partake in their success, right? Not just for yourself. So I just wanted to share that.
For sure. That's a great advice. Thank you.
I'm very tempted to share a story as well, if that's okay. So I did have a situation where I got a managerial role, leadership role. And that was one of the questions that was asked. What did I do to deserve the role? Obviously, my apprehensions did not matter anymore. And I could see that the folks were more apprehensive than me. So it's about, again, making it about the other set of people, in this case. The first and foremost thing that really helps is not dismissing their feelings, right? Whether it's true or not, it's to give full attention and value to what they're bringing up. So that was number one. And number two is accepting the truth where there is a situation that is uncomfortable. Following it up with, we're all adults here, and I believe even kids are pretty strong about this, is that we can learn to agree to disagree and move forward with something that's more productive. So following up with that is, in the short term, win them with kindness, and in the long term, win them with results. So going back to articulating what Vidya also mentioned earlier is have these tangible outcomes that will showcase them as strong leaders in the organization. Yes, they're not the leader within the team or they're not the official manager, but they are still going to be viewed as leaders across the organization. And I think as managers or as leaders, we tend to do less of the technical, less of the business, because we care about people and we position people to actually do the job well. And that is where the magic really happens. So when they see over time that you're investing in them and now they are getting better, things can turn around. At least it's an opportunity to turn around.
So that was so uncomfortable for you. I can imagine, like, if somebody straight up asks you, what did you do to deserve this role? Like, what did you respond to that? Like, what was your response?
I don't have an answer. But all I care about is not the customers, not the product, but the team.
Yeah.
And I'm very thankful for them, even today, for giving me a chance to lead them.
Excellent. I observed a similar situation when I was a new hire. I just watched this team leader go from hostile to, hey, this is a nice guy. He's not so bad. And he took him on as almost like an advisor for him. He was not authoritative with him at all. And he used to bring him in for everything. It's like, what do you think? Let me tap into your advice for this. I'm new at this and I'm going to ask you for advice, So in doing that, he didn't lose any of his authority. He didn't lose any of his influence, and instead he gained the respect of this particular individual. So that was one way to go about it. I know there's a million other ways to go about it, but that's what I observed, and I was really impressed with the way he handled and the way he turned him around from the same, like you, sort of like from hostile to, this is a good guy and I'm going to stand by him. So that was a cool thing to observe as well. We were talking about this with Suraj earlier, where what are the things you should do when you're in that role? You are working with the person, or you are the person who has, whether you are the person who has the authority, who has the influence and is working towards that title. What are the things that you can do? Like, what are the pros and cons, the key things that you can do to prevent yourself from being taken advantage of? So that's where I want to go with next, Suraj.
Vidya, you want to go first, or?
Zaha, your question was around, like, if you are the person who's leading without authority, and to ensure that you don't get taken advantage of, right? Sure. So I think one of the story comes to my mind also. Again, I'd like to use a personal story where I wasn't the manager. I was an independent, contributor, a product manager. And I was just moved, due to organizational changes, I was actually moved over to a team that I had no idea of what product it was. And the engineering team that also was going to work with me didn't have knowledge of this product, right? The company just decided that they want to move a product area from one area to our area. And they assigned us new product, and then we were supposed to also make some changes. And, naturally, I was in this role. Typically, when you're in product management, you're actually, the manager title isn't there, right? The project manager, program manager, product managers, they all have the title, but you're really not. You don't have people reporting to you. But there's a reason why the title isn't in there, or the term isn't there, the manager term isn't there, because they want you to actually lead teams without really having that authority. So that's why I think this stories. So I would really, I would say that you need to first demonstrate what you're doing. You have to have concrete examples, and your direct manager needs to be aware of that. And if you have other team members that can speak to you, on your behalf, that's great, right? You can build allies with the people that you're actually leading, and they would become your, allies to also speak to that. So yeah, I would say that keep that in mind, because oftentimes otherwise you'll just keep doing it, and then you feel that you don't, you're not getting anywhere with it.
Yeah, I think you brought up a really important point where you were able to talk to your manager with concrete examples, right? Because you knew what you were doing and you had that documented, I suppose. And, we talked about this, Suraj, if you remember, in one of our previous calls, where you have a task management matrix where you document all the things that you do, but also the impact that it's having. And to do that as, on a habitual basis, you can have these conversations with your manager to say, okay, here's what I did, here's the impact it's had, and I've been doing all these things which are really beyond my, my responsibilities, and all of this, leadership and management level impact that I'm having. So yeah, definitely. I think that's really cool.
Sorry, Vidya, I was going to say that I took some notes on what you said, and it's a marvelous recipe or a template. So if I can just paraphrase what you said earlier, why not become a bargain in your role? If you're doing the job of 2 to 3 people, there's no need for management to actually make you a manager, because who's going to come in and do the job of 2 to 3 people, right? So instead, ask yourself the question, number one, are you delegating? And I think that's one aspect. And the most important thing, like what you said, you asked your manager. A lot of us fail to ask. The crying baby gets the milk, right? And what you also ended up doing was you reset expectations, and you pivoted off of leverage. You had a value proposition that only you could bring, and that was the leverage that you utilized. In a sense, you made yourself obsolete when you actually delegated to other people, and that's by building a tribe. So whatever you said, that's a marvelous recipe. So people who are listening, please write down what Vidya just said right now and utilize it to succeed. That's what I would recommend people do.
And in fact, I just wanted to add one thing that also came to my mind as you were reading that out, Raj, is that oftentimes this is, now I've had 20 years of experience. Sometimes you tend to think that, if I just do a good job, somebody will notice. And that's not true at all. I can say that even now, even with my senior leadership role, I'm so far remote from the day-to-day activities that I don't, unless somebody tells me. So I actually encourage my direct reports to say, I really need you to advocate for yourself and speak to the things that you're doing. And Zaha, like you said, the impact it's bringing, right? Because in day-to-day, you don't really see it unless they speak to it. So that's something that I often heard and, early on in my career, or, you hear in your workplace that somebody will say, oh, I'm doing such a good job, but like my manager doesn't even seem to care or know it. And I'm doing the work of 3 people. But if you have not shown them that you're doing it with examples and the impact it's bringing, how would they know? Right. So a lot of times people, tend to either blame the system or blame their supervisor, but I think it's important to ask the question and self-reflect to say, have you made an attempt to showcase, your contributions, and how have you done it? Like, you need to have that rubric with concrete examples and the impact it's bringing to the business, to the team, to the organization. And I think, that will get attention of the leaders.
Suresh, do you have anything to say?
No, I thought this was a fantastic session. I know we are 6 minutes over.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for, this engagement right here. I'm going to let you take us home.
If there's no other questions, I guess we'll give everybody back their time. And thank you all for joining Grow Your Mind from Grow You Now. And I want to give a very special thank you to Vidya. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making the time. And thank you for sharing all your stories. And thank you to Suraj. Thanks for organizing this and bringing us all together. And thank you for your wisdom. I really enjoyed doing this session. It was really fun. And shout out to all of you guys for bringing in all your questions and keeping us all engaged. It was a very engaged and fun session for us. And there's going to be a survey that pops up after the session. Please take that helps us to make the content better for you. If you have any feedback, we would love to hear from you. And we also have an official YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow that. And also any kind of events that we have in the future, we'll announce those on LinkedIn and our other social media channels. So with that, I'm wishing you all learning, joy, and success. Thank you for joining, everybody.